There's a guy I know named Marcus, 44 years old, chemistry teacher, married with two kids. For 19 years, the third of every month, $1,847 left his checking account automatically. He didn't think about it anymore. It was just gone. Like gravity, like taxes, like the background hum of a refrigerator you stopped hearing a decade ago. Then one Tuesday morning in October, he made his final mortgage payment. He sat at his kitchen table, stared at the confirmation email, and waited for some feeling. The financial equivalent of a finish line ribbon breaking across his chest. Instead, he felt almost nothing. Mild relief, maybe. He poured a second cup of coffee, went to work, taught third period chemistry, came home, made dinner. Wednesday was the same. Thursday was the same. A month later, $1,847 was still sitting in his checking account, and he had no system for what to do with it. 6 months after paying off his house, Marcus had spent that extra money on a kitchen renovation, 2 weekend trips, a new set of golf clubs he uses 4 times a year, and an upgrade to a car he didn't need. He had quietly accidentally absorbed the most powerful financial event of his adult life into lifestyle inflation without even noticing. By the time I talked to him 18 months later, he was trying to remember where the money had gone. He couldn't. Here's what nobody tells you about paying off your house. The moment itself is anticlimactic. But what happens in the 24 months after that moment is the single most consequential financial decision most people will ever make. And almost nobody makes it intentionally. And I've spent years reading institutional research and behavioral data on what happens to household wealth after mortgage payoff. The pattern I found is both fascinating and genuinely alarming, because there are two completely different trajectories that split apart the moment that final payment clears. On one track, the people who understand what just happened to them mathematically. They redirect that cash flow immediately, deliberately, and systematically. They use the mortgage payoff as a launch pad. On the other track, you have the Marcus track, the lifestyle absorption track. People who worked for 19 or 20 or 25 years to reach this moment and then accidentally poured the most powerful financial accelerant of their lives into a kitchen renovation and a lease on something German. By the end of this, well, you'll understand exactly why paying off your house is not a finish line. It's an ignition switch. You'll understand the math behind why the monthly cash flow you just freed up is worth more in the next 10 years than it was in the previous 20. You'll understand the 3 psychological traps that swallow this moment alive for most people, and you'll have a specific numbered framework for what to actually do in the 90 days after your mortgage dies, before lifestyle inflation makes the decision for you. Let me start with a historical analogy that sounds completely unrelated. I promise it connects. In 1944, as World War II was grinding toward its end, the Allied forces faced a logistical problem that almost nobody talks about. They had spent years building enormous supply chains, billions of dollars of infrastructure, equipment, auto personnel, and systems all pointed at a single purpose: prosecuting a war. When the war ended, all of that capacity was suddenly available. And what a country does with suddenly available capacity defines the next chapter of its history. Japan redirected its industrial base into export manufacturing and became an economic titan within 2 decades. Germany rebuilt its engineering sector. Britain, exhausted and debt-laden, failed to redirect its capacity effectively and spent the next 30 years in relative economic decline while its neighbors surged. Same moment of liberation, completely different outcomes. The difference was whether the capacity was redirected with intention or allowed to dissipate. Your mortgage is a war, not a metaphorical one. A real, grinding, multi-decade financial conflict that has been consuming somewhere between 15 and 40% of your monthly income for the better part of your adult life. And the day it ends, you have a choice that looks deceptively simple, but is actually the defining financial decision of the second half of your life. Do you redirect the capacity, or do you let it dissipate into a kitchen that you'll stop noticing in 8 months? Here's why this moment is mathematically different from every other financial decision you've made. And this is the part most people completely miss. The median American mortgage payment in 2026 is approximately $2,100 a month. If you've just paid off your house, you have freed up $2,100 per month. That's $25,200 per year. That number sounds significant because it is. Hajuri, but here's where most people's thinking stops too early. They think of it as extra money, spending money, a reward for 20 years of discipline. And that framing is the first trap. Here is what $2,100 per month actually is if you treat it as an investment instead of income. At 7% annual return, the conservative inflation-adjusted historical average of the S&P 500 going back to 1926, not a crypto fantasy, not a hot stock pick, just a boring index fund, $2,100 per month invested for 10 years becomes approximately $346,000. Not from a lump sum you had saved, from the cash flow you just freed up by eliminating your mortgage. In 15 years at the same rate, that number becomes roughly $660,000. In 20 years, it crosses $1.1 million. And that is $1 million decision you are making in the 90 days after your final mortgage payment. The question is whether you realize you're making it. Now let me show you what happens on the Marcus track. He absorbed the $2,100 into a kitchen renovation, car upgrade, and lifestyle creep. His monthly spending increased by approximately $1,400 permanently through new recurring costs. The remaining $700 drifted into the checking account and got spent on things he can't name. At 7% over 10 years, that $2,100 he didn't invest cost him not $2,100 a month. It cost him $346,000. He paid $52,000 for a kitchen that added maybe $15,000 to his home's value. He financed the gap with what could have been his financial independence. I'm not saying Marcus is foolish. I'm saying he's completely normal. And completely normal, array in this moment, is financially devastating. Now here's the second thing that changes the day you pay off your house. And this one is actually more important than the cash flow conversation, and almost nobody has it explicitly. Think about your financial life for the past 2 decades. Every decision you made about career, investment, risk, all of it was made in the shadow of the mortgage. You needed the job, not because you wanted it, not because it was optimal, because the third of every month, the bank was going to take its payment regardless of whether your employer was treating you well, or your business had a bad quarter, or the economy turned sideways. The mortgage was a leash, a long leash maybe, a leash you got used to, but a leash. The day that leash disappears, well, you should be asking a completely different set of questions about your financial life. The most important one being, what would I do differently if I couldn't lose my home? Because the answer to that question is almost always significantly more. A guy I know named Thomas had been running a small regional accounting firm as a partner for 12 years. Solid business, good income, deeply bored. He'd wanted to spin off and start his own boutique advisory practice for years, but the mortgage was always the reason he couldn't. He needed the salary. He needed the income certainty. He made his final mortgage payment at 51 years old. Within 18 months, he left the partnership and launched his own practice. His income dropped for the first year. It didn't matter. His housing was secure. The risk tolerance that had been artificially suppressed for 20 years by the presence of that monthly obligation was suddenly available to him. He's now running a business worth more than the house he paid off. The research on this is consistent. Outright homeowners, people with no mortgage, start businesses at higher rates than both renters and mortgage homeowners. The reason isn't capital. They don't necessarily have more cash. The reason is risk tolerance. When you can't lose your home, you can take risks you couldn't take before. And risk deployed intelligently is the engine of wealth creation. Most people treat their paid-off home as the end of a financial journey. The smartest people treat it as the beginning of a different kind of financial life. One where the constraints that shaped every major decision for 2 decades no longer apply. Now let me talk about the 3 psychological traps, because even people who understand the math at an intellectual level still fall into them. Trap 1 is the reward mindset. You worked hard, you sacrificed, you didn't upgrade the kitchen, drove the car an extra 3 years, white-knuckled a 20-year financial commitment. You deserve something, and you do. This feeling is completely real and completely understandable. The problem is that it doesn't have a natural off switch. The reward mindset, once activated, tends to persist. The kitchen renovation becomes the bathroom renovation. The car upgrade becomes the boat. Before you know it, your monthly expenses have expanded to consume most of the cash flow you freed up. And you've converted a financial accelerant into lifestyle upgrades with diminishing returns and no compounding. The fix for trap one is to assign the cash flow before the reward mindset claims it. In the literal week after your final mortgage payment, before the money has ever appeared as available in your mental accounting, you automate its investment. You set up the transfer. You make it invisible. You treat the $2,100 exactly the way you treated your mortgage payment for 20 years, as a non-negotiable, automatic monthly obligation. Except this time, it's going to Vanguard instead of the bank. You are allowed to celebrate. Set a number for it. Spend it fully and intentionally, then redirect the rest automatically before lifestyle inflation makes the decision for you. Trap 2 is safety hoarding. This is the opposite of the reward mindset, but equally destructive. These are the people who pay off the house and feel so relieved by the security that they become paralyzed. They take the freed up cash flow and put it in a savings account earning 3%. They're not spending irresponsibly, they're saving responsibly in the wrong instrument. At inflation above 3%, they're losing purchasing power every year while feeling virtuous about it. I see this most in people who paid off their house after a long period of financial stress. The mortgage payoff felt like reaching dry land after years in the ocean, and now they don't want to go back in the water. They want to accumulate cash where they can see it, where it feels safe, where it can't go down. Here is the math on what this trade actually costs. In the same $2,100 per month in a high-yield savings account at 4%, generous for where rates are heading, over 10 years becomes approximately $300,000 to $7,000. In an S&P 500 index fund at 7%, the same contributions become $346,000. That gap is nearly $40,000. Over 20 years, the gap exceeds $400,000. The safety hoarding trap over a 20-year post-mortgage period costs you roughly the price of a second home to feel safe when you already own a home outright. Trap 3 is the false finish line, the subconscious belief that paying off the house was the goal, that financial security has been achieved, that the hard work is done. People in this trap don't blow the money on lifestyle, and they don't hoard it in savings. They just relax. Back off on intensity. Stop thinking hard about the next move. Coast. And coasting in your late 40s or early 50s, when compound interest is about to do its most dramatic work, is extraordinarily expensive. If you're 50 years old when you pay off your house, money at 7% doubles roughly every 10 years. That means every dollar you invest now doubles at least once before you retire and potentially approaches doubling again. The math at 50 is still violently powerful, but only if you act. The false finish line trap convinces you that you've won when you've actually just reached the starting line for the most productive investment decade of your life. Let me give you specific numbers to make this real. Dan is 50 years old. He just paid off his house. He has $180,000 in his 401k. If Dan falls into the false finish line trap, expands his lifestyle modestly, keeps contributing 6% to his 401k, doesn't deliberately redirect the mortgage payment, at 65, he has approximately $490,000 in retirement savings. Combined with Social Security at $24,000 per year, his annual retirement income is around $43,000. That's watching every grocery receipt. That's hoping nothing expensive breaks. Now run the same scenario where Dan treats the payoff as a launch event. He maxes out his 401k at $31,000 per year. He opens a taxable brokerage and contributes an additional $400 monthly. At 65, his retirement accounts have grown to approximately $1.3 million. His taxable brokerage adds another $120,000. Total investable assets around $1.45 million. At 4% withdrawal, that's $58,000 per year from investments plus Social Security. He's at $82,000 annually. He travels. He helps his kids. He handles the medical bills without going into debt. Same person, same house, same income. The only variable is what he did in the 90 days after his final mortgage payment. Here is the 5-step framework for those 90 days. Step 1. Automate the redirect in the first week. Before the money has appeared in your mental accounting as available, set up automatic investment transfers that replace your mortgage payment. You condition yourself for 20 years to treat this dollar amount as non-negotiable. Transfer that conditioning to your investment accounts. Set it up the day you make your final payment, if possible. Every day you wait is a day the money starts feeling like income rather than an obligation. Step 2. Recalculate your emergency fund using your new risk profile. Before payoff, the standard recommendation is 3 to 6 months of expenses in liquid savings. After payoff, your monthly survival number dropped dramatically. You have no housing payment. In many cases, you are now overcapitalized in cash relative to your actual risk exposure, and you can redeploy some of that into higher returning investments. Do this math explicitly. Don't assume your emergency fund is still calibrated correctly. Step 3. Maximize every tax-advantaged account available to you. The 401k contribution limit in 2026 is $31,000 if you're 50 or older. IRAs add another $8,000. HSAs add $8,550 for a family. That's potentially $47,000 per year in tax-advantaged space. In most cases, your freed mortgage cash flow can fill most of this space. Do not leave it unused. You are getting compound growth and tax efficiency simultaneously. The government is subsidizing one of the 2 compounding mechanisms working for you. Step 4. Decide deliberately on risk reallocation. Now that your housing is secure, what risks have you been avoiding that you should revisit? Career risk, entrepreneurship, a more aggressive portfolio allocation, a rental property. The specific answer is personal, but the question is universal. Your risk tolerance just changed. Your downside floor is different than it was before payoff. Treat that as a genuine strategic opportunity, not background noise. Step 5. Set the 10-year number and work backward. What does financial independence look like for you at 60 or 65? If you want $80,000 per year in retirement and Social Security covers $24,000 of that, your portfolio needs to generate $56,000 annually. At the 4% withdrawal rule, that requires $1.4 million in investable assets. Where are you today? What monthly investment gets you there from here? The answer might be fully achievable, but you cannot optimize toward a number you haven't defined. Let me close with 2 neighbors. Both paid off their homes the same year. Both were 51. Both had $150,000 in retirement savings and similar incomes. The first, Greg, treated the payoff as a finish line. He renovated his kitchen for $45,000, upgraded his car, took nicer vacations, monthly expenses expanded by $1,600, still contributed 6% to his 401k. At 65, Greg had approximately $490,000 in retirement savings and a beautiful kitchen. He went back to work part-time at 67 because the math didn't hold. He's not broke. He's just not free. And there's a difference. The second, Alan, treated the payoff as a launch event. The week he made his final payment, he automated $2,200 per month into a maxed 401k and a taxable brokerage. He took one trip to celebrate, $3,000 intentional, fully spent, then finished. Kept the car 4 more years, painted the kitchen himself for $400 and replaced the hardware. At 65, Alan had approximately $1.35 million in investable assets. He retired. Fully. He traveled twice a year. He helped his kids with down payments. He bought the organic strawberries without checking the price. He never wore an orange apron. Same neighborhood, same payoff year, same starting position, different outcomes by a factor of nearly 3 from the decisions made in the 90 days after a Tuesday morning confirmation email. The mortgage was a war. You won. On the capacity you spent 20 years building to fight it is now yours. The question is what you conscripted to do next. Because lifestyle inflation is standing by with a very convincing pitch about kitchen countertops and European sedans. And compound interest is quietly waiting for you to make a different call. The compounding you've been waiting for is waiting on you. Hit subscribe if this reframes something for you. Drop a comment telling me where you are in the journey. still paying down, approaching payoff, or already on the other side and figuring out what comes next. And if you're already there and that cash flow hasn't been redirected yet, start tonight. The math doesn't care about your reasons. It only cares about time.